Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Swallowed Star based on novel. So let's start. The viscous dark gold light surged towards the Empyrean blazing bull that was getting closer and closer. This caused the bull to slow down considerably. It was the Xuanwu's domain. It was the Xuanwu's domain that had fused with a golden tortoise. Water curbs fire. A Xuanwu was a godly beast that possessed both the water and earth elements. Along with the enhancements that a golden tortoise brought to a Xuanwu, this Xuanwu's domain was far stronger than when Xusancha unleashed it before. The bright golden light transformed into a shooting star that shone extremely brightly in the Xuanwu domain. Boom! Xusancha, who had turned into a Xuanwu, quickly summoned his Turtle God's Strike. Xuanwu True Body, Xuanwu's Domain, and Turtle God's Strike, they were Xusancha's 7th, 6th, and 5th soul skills respectively. Xusancha unleashed his full strength as he unleashed all three of them at the same time. The heavy collision caused more than 50 Empyrean pearls in front of the Empyrean blazing bull to be crushed. But Xusancha's golden Xuanwu was also flung backward, causing his Xuanwu's domain to dissipate. This was the difference between their abilities. If Xusancha were also a titled Dolor, he would have been able to destroy Wang Yihan with this attack. A huge pink python started to pester and wrap itself around the Empyrean blazing bull just as he stopped after colliding with Xusancha. It was so huge that it didn't pale in comparison to the bull. As it wrapped itself around the bull, it managed to lock it tightly in the air. Soft Bone Lock. This was obviously Jiangnanen's 5th soul skill, Soft Bone Lock. Furthermore, the huge python was still releasing glaring, golden light. Invincible Golden Body. Jiangnan had actually unleashed two godly skills using her Ruby Soft Tendon Python, Soft Bone Lock and Invincible Golden Body. Hui Yuhao, who had been calmly drifting in the air while commanding his comrades all this while, finally made his move. Two rows of nozzles appeared behind his solo battle armor. These nozzles were located at the center of the three wings of his flying-type soul tool, just to the sides of his backbone. There were 18 of them. These 18 nozzles instantly released bright light. Behind Hui Yuhao, Tang Wutong had already flown up. She avoided these lights, whereas Hui Yuhao was like a shooting star as he charged towards Wang Yihan. In the air, his entire aura completely changed. The look in his eyes was both deep and gentle, as if he was filled with boundless yearning. The intense emotions he was experiencing could even be felt by the rest of his comrades around him. A projection slowly formed behind him. This figure had ravishing looks and a slender figure. There was even a gentle smiling intent and a boundless look of longing on the face of this figure. Wasn't she Wang Donga? Right now, Tang Wutong had just risen high up in the air, and saw everything clearly. When she saw Wang Donga's projection slowly forming behind Hui Yuhao, she could sense the boundless yearning that filled Hui Yuhao, and the rich emotions that he was experiencing. She was completely stunned. An indescribable sense of pain instantly coursed through her entire body. She became a little dazed as she drifted in the air. Haodong Palm, a palm that lasted eternally. Without using any soul skill or element, Hui Yuhao could only think of his Haodong Palm right now. His three energies and inner emotions were fused together to form a self-invented soul skill. The three ultimate Haodong skills were undoubtedly the greatest skills that Hui Yuhao could unleash right now. On his forehead, his Eye of Destiny had long since opened. His 6th soul ring shone. His destiny's demise that came from Wang Qiu tore apart all material defenses and bore down on the Empyrean blazing bull. More accurately speaking, there was only a mad bull right now. This was because the Empyrean pearls had been crushed earlier and were yet to be replenished. Hui Yuhao was too quick. His instantaneous charge even caused a sonic boom. This was different from instant teleportation. Instant teleportation only enabled one to disappear and reappear in space. There wasn't any momentum to it. However, Hui Yuhao's charge was part of his fighting strength. His bright golden palm carried a boundless sense of yearning and longing as it struck the Empyrean blazing bull's forehead. The massive bull paused for a moment. Following this, a layer of bright red light was unleashed from its body. The red light appeared very quickly, but also dissipated very quickly. The moment it appeared, it was as if an eggshell had engulfed the bull. However, this eggshell was crushed as quickly as it had appeared, and Hui Yuhao's palm still managed to strike the mad bull's skull. A groan ensued, and all the flames on the Empyrean blazing bull's body dispersed, revealing the original form of the Empyreal pearls. However, the flames were soon drawn back. Even so, that split second that they had dispersed still caused more than half of them to dissipate. Among humans, Yu Hao was still considered rather large. However, he was much smaller compared to the Empyrean Blazing Bull. Yet, he still managed to forcibly stop Wang Yiheng's advance just like that. Yu Hao's eyes had already turned into two pupils. There weren't any enemies in his eyes anymore. There were only countless projections of Wang Donga floating in his eyes. He gave his all in this strike, venting his frustration and disappointment after he found out that Tang Wutong wasn't Wang Donga. This strike was the greatest strike that he had ever unleashed. He was deflected back. A streak of golden light instantly shone from his Eye of Destiny. The glaring, golden light landed on the head of the Empyrean Blazing Bull. It was very thin, but more than half of it managed to pierce through the bull's head. Destiny's adjudication. Golden Dragon Pike. At the same time, a trace of dark intent started to silently swirl up. From the sky, golden lightning struck. There was a guy who was holding his sword with both his hands, whose sword was pointing downward. The sword fanatic, who had yet to make a move, finally unleashed his strongest strike. Wang Yiheng had never expected these young soul sages to be so difficult to deal with. When he was pestered by the huge python earlier, he had immediately unleashed his full strength to break free. However, there seemed to be a layer of something which resembled an invincible barrier on the python which blocked off his attack. Before he could unleash his second attack, Yu Hao had already attacked him. The protective barrier that protected him was a Blood Empyrean barrier, a passive, defensive-type soul tool that he had personally invented. When his enemy's attack might threaten his life, it would be immediately activated on its own. Did my barrier malfunction? It's only the attack of a soul sage. Furthermore, he's only using his palm. How can he possibly threaten my life? However, his barrier revealed the answer in the next moment. This was because it was crushed. It had always been the case that defensive-type soul tools were more difficult to create than offensive-type soul tools. This was because attacks could be as devastating and chaotic as possible, while a strong defense required proper materials and techniques to achieve. It was even more difficult for passive defensive-type soul tools. This was why his Blood Empyrean barrier wasn't a Class 9 soul tool, but a Class 8 soul tool. A Class 8 defensive-type soul tool had been crushed by a palm just like that. How powerful was it? Furthermore, its strength didn't fall after destroying the barrier. It still continued to strike the Empyrean Blazing Bull. At that instant, Wang Yiheng only felt that his spiritual sea had cracked. Countless illusions surfaced in his head. There were friends he once had when he was young, his ex-lovers and his elders. A sense of yearning immediately flooded his brain. The remaining strength of the Haodong palm wasn't very much. However, under the effect of Yu Hao's destiny demise, Wang Yiheng's skull was struck loose. More importantly, he couldn't control his body after he was struck by the Haodong palm. This was the truly terrifying part. As a Class 9 soul engineer and titled Dolor, Wang Yiheng's willpower was undoubtedly very strong. He struggled to break free from such a state. However, the spiritual power that fused into his head didn't just cause pure destruction. It was more like a trigger. It triggered the deepest yearnings in his mind. A person would definitely have something or someone that he missed. Even Ji Juechen wasn't an exception. When Yu Hao's golden dragon pike stabbed into the Empyreal Blazing Bull's head, the terrifying spiritual power instantly surged into Yu Hao's body and replenished his drained soul power, whereas Wang Yiheng's body was shaking tremendously. He felt that his life was in danger. No! I don't want to die! Wang Yiheng was screaming in his heart and wanted to break free from such a state. However, he was a soul engineer. Given his spiritual cultivation, he couldn't possibly compare to a rank 90 soul master. At this moment, how could he possibly quickly break free even as he tried his best? He was even surrounded by the massive ruby soft tendon python. Puff, when darkness descends, the light delivers judgment. The judgment sword fell from the sky as it carried the sword fanatic's sword intent. Destiny's demise reduced all physical barriers to nothing. Furthermore, the golden dragon pike had already wounded the mad bull Dolor. How could he possibly resist another attack? The black and white sword stabbed all the way through into the bull's head. It went completely through the bull's skull. Even though it was only a bull, it was still a martial soul true body formed by a soul master. This wasn't any different from stabbing Wang Yiheng's true forehead. No, how is this possible? How can I possibly die by the hands of such weak beings? Wang Yiheng was indignant. He shouted with all his might and summoned his terrifying soul power once again. The Judgment Sword and Golden Dragon Pike were both flung away by this destructive intent. Hu Yuhao and Ji Juechen suffered the same fate too. The ruby soft tendon python also turned illusory and returned to Jiang Nanan's body. Sparks flashed in the air. Empyrean pearls fell uncontrollably from the sky. The Mad Bull Dolor had already turned into a human once again. However, his forehead had been badly wounded. He shouted furiously and kept on struggling. His soul power kept on seeping out, but it couldn't change the fact that he had been fatally wounded. The life energy of a titled Dolor was extremely terrifying. Even after suffering such a fatal injury, which was a result of the devouring power of the Golden Dragon Spear and the judgment of the Judgment Sword, Wang Yiheng was still alive. Hu Yuhao had already regained a streak of his consciousness when the Mad Bull Dolor had completely unleashed his strength. He blocked Ji Juechen. Even though the two of them were flung away, Hu Yuhao took close to 90% of the impact. His solo battle armor played a crucial role at this moment. It was impossible for him to block the all-out attack of a titled Dolor, but Wang Yiheng was unable to attack given the state he was in. He could only release whatever external strength he had. Hu Yuhao spat out a mouthful of blood, but he wasn't too seriously injured. Ji Juechen grabbed hold of him in the air. He didn't thank Hu Yuhao, but only patted his shoulder. Everyone from Shrek was scattered in the air right now. They watched as Wang Yiheng put up his final struggle. Right now, reinforcements from the Star Luo Empire had already arrived. The White Tiger Duke was personally here. There were also other titled Dolor from their respective Soul Engineer legions. The Star Luo Empire had too much information about Wang Yiheng, the leader of the evil tyrant Soul Engineer Legion. However, they still felt a little unbelieving that Wang Yiheng had been subjected to such fatal injuries right now. He was the leader of the evil tyrant Soul Engineer Legion. He was actually surrounded and attacked by 8 Soul Sages from Shrek Academy. These titled Dolor were confident of taking Wang Yiheng on in a close combat fight. However, they also couldn't deny that the survivability of a Soul Engineer of the same tier was stronger. Would Wang Yiheng have a lack of powerful soul tools on him? His Empyrean Blaze combined offense and defense. Furthermore, he had great control over his Empyrean Blaze. However, Wang Yiheng's struggle lasted for a few minutes in the air before he finally dropped indignantly from the sky. Shu Sancha was already back to his original form. He lifted his golden Xuanwu shield and his 4th soul ring flashed before he managed to drag Wang Yiheng's corpse over. How precious was the corpse of a Class 9 Soul Engineer? No one knew. This was because there had never been a situation in the Sun Moon Empire's history that the corpse of a Class 9 Soul Engineer had landed in an enemy's hands. Wang Yiheng was the first. Jiang Nannan was a little worried as she looked at Hu Yuhao. Right now, Hu Yuhao had already regained his awareness even though he was still bugged by the side effects of his Haodong Palm. He gently nodded to confirm that Wang Yiheng was already dead through his spiritual detection. Great! Nan Qiuqiu cheered and hugged Yi Gai, who was beside her. Yi Gai's body suddenly became a little unstable. She almost couldn't control her flying-type soul tool. Even though she could use her wings to fly, it was very draining on her soul power. Most of the time, she would use her flying-type soul tool. Jing Ziyan also wore a smile on her face. Ji Juechen looked as indifferent as ever, as if the last strike had nothing to do with him. Tang Wutong calmly opened her dragon wings and drifted closer to Hu Yuhao. She didn't seem to be affected by Wang Yiheng's death. Right now, all of her attention was drawn to Hu Yuhao. Her gaze was focused, but no one could guess what she was thinking. The White Tiger Duke led the other titled Dolor as they came over. They first came beside Shu Sancha and seriously checked Wang Yiheng's condition. A titled Dolor who appeared to be in his 60s nodded before saying, "Yes, it's Wang Yiheng, the leader of the evil tyrant Soul Engineer Legion." A look of delighted surprise soon appeared on the faces of the other titled Dolor. This was probably the best outcome that the Star Luo Empire had achieved since the war had started. Even though the Empire wasn't really responsible for killing Wang Yiheng, such a result was good enough to boost the morale of the troops. It was a morale booster for all the deflated Soul Engineers who had witnessed the deaths of more than 2,000 Soul Masters the last time around. The White Tiger Duke came beside Hu Yuhao and was a little perplexed as he looked at him. "Hu Yuhao, you should have left it to us this time." Hu Yuhao twisted his head to look at him, but didn't say anything. There was an indifferent look in his eyes. He even appeared to be cold. Such an expression left the White Tiger Duke a little stunned. He couldn't understand it. Furthermore, he also seemed to have seen something familiar in Hui Yuhao's eyes. However, Hui Yuhao quickly shifted his gaze away immediately after their eyes met, and stopped looking at the White Tiger Duke. What was going on? Hui Yuhao had unleashed his Haodong palm, which was filled with his yearning for Wang Donga and his mother. At such a time, he was prone to losing control of his focus. In addition, Dai Hao was beside him. How could he possibly control his emotions? Jiang Nan flew to Hui Yuhao's side and apologetically said to the White Tiger Duke, "I'm sorry, Duke. Hui Yuhao unleashed his self-invented soul skill earlier and drained too much of his spiritual power. That has affected his emotions, and he's still suffering the side effects of it. Please let him recover first. He's not in his normal emotional state right now." The White Tiger Duke was only enlightened at this point and nodded gently. He replied, "All right, let's return first." Under the protection of the bunch of titled Dolor, everyone turned around and proceeded in the direction of the Northwestern Field Army's base. Very soon, they arrived back at their base. After landing, Hui Yuhao had already recovered significantly. He turned to Xu Sancha and said, "Third Senior, hand the corpse over to the Duke, but grab his things first. He wouldn't be so foolishly generous." Everyone clearly knew that the accessories of a Class 9 soul engineer were very valuable. Wang Yiheng's most valuable possession was undoubtedly his Empyrean blaze. Earlier, all the pearls had fallen off. With Hui Yuhao's spiritual senses, he informed Nanqiuqiu and Yi Gai of their rough locations before they went to retrieve them. It was impossible for them to give up possession of these pearls. As for what the Mad Bull Dolor had on him earlier, no one knew. However, they would be a reward for Hui Yuhao and the rest. The White Tiger Duke had mentioned before that they could keep whatever they retrieved. If they were willing to sell them to the Star Luo Empire, the Empire would buy them at market price. This was also why Hui Yuhao didn't ask the White Tiger Duke to coordinate with them earlier. If the Northwestern Field Army's titled Dolor coordinated and reinforced them earlier, who would be the rightful owner of everything that they obtained from the Mad Bull Dolor? The few titled Dolor from the Star Luo Empire looked at one another and appeared a little discontented. This was the base of the Northwestern Field Army. However, the White Tiger Duke's expression didn't change. He nodded and said, "Thanks, Yuhao. I'll ask someone to record your contributions." Hui Yuhao was a little unwilling to look at him right now, and so he didn't. He lifted his right hand, and a streak of blue light shot forward at the empty ground in front of him. Suddenly, a huge soul tool with a diameter of over 2 meters appeared in front of everyone. All the titled Dolor were surprised. Hui Yuhao calmly said, "This is a high-altitude aerial surveillance soul tool that belongs to the Sun Moon Empire. I'm going to give it to the Star Luo Empire. I hope that this will expedite the Empire's research on soul tools. I'm sorry, White Tiger Duke. I'm a little tired, and would like to go and rest first." Yuhao, the White Tiger Duke, was a little agitated when he saw such a huge surveillance soul tool. He actually succeeded, and even killed a titled Dolor. However, Hui Yuhao had turned around and left before he could even express his gratitude. All the titled Dolor present didn't question Hui Yuhao's attitude this time. This was because they were all fixated on the high-altitude aerial surveillance soul tool right now. The value of this item couldn't be measured monetarily. Hui Yuhao's act of letting it out appeased them. Xu Sancha didn't stand on ceremony at all. He took everything that Wang Yiheng possessed and put it away in his own storage-type soul tool. He was going to pass it to Hui Yuhao after he fully recovered. Gentle light flashed, and Hui Yuhao revealed a mysterious look on his face. He calmly walked towards his tent as he recalled what had happened earlier. He had unleashed his strongest strike earlier. In addition, he seemed to feel that something in his body had made a breakthrough when he unleashed that strike. It was a magical feeling. It was also at that moment that his soul power improved by leaps and bounds. He was walking before he heard a voice echoing from behind, "Hui Yuhao." Hui Yuhao stopped and turned his head. Tang Wutong took 2 quick steps and rushed to his side. As she looked at him, her expression became more and more perplexed. "Can you tell me the name of your palm strike earlier?" Hui Yuhao nodded and replied, "The Haodong palm, a palm that will last eternally." "The Haodong palm, a palm that will last eternally." Tang Wutong recited the words. Hui Yuhao didn't stop, and continued walking towards his tent. However, Tang Wutong didn't follow him anymore. Rather, she stood where she was, and was in a little daze as she looked at his back. "Haodong palm, Haodong palm. Hao from Hui Yu Hao and Dong from Wang Donga. The Haodong palm, a palm that will last eternally. It seems like my impression of him was wrong. Hui Yu Hao and everyone from Shrek Academy went to rest. On the other side, the commander's tent was very crowded right now. The senior commanders gathered, and none of them had the intention to rest. In the center of the tent, the table had already been moved to one side to be replaced by Wang Yiheng's corpse and the massive high-altitude aerial surveillance Soul tool right now. When Xu Jiujiu first laid eyes on the high-altitude aerial surveillance Soul tool, she couldn't shift her gaze away anymore. As the highest-ranked individual in charge of the Star Luo Empire's intelligence department, she reported directly to the Emperor of the Star Luo Empire. She had put in a lot of effort for the Sun Moon Empire's own aerial surveillance Soul tools. She had managed to obtain ordinary aerial surveillance Soul tools before. However, those Soul tools had self-destruction mechanisms installed within them. Once they were dismantled, they would blow apart. The Star Luo Empire had suffered a lot because of this. Thus, it was also her first time seeing this high-altitude aerial surveillance Soul tool in front of her. She was completely astonished. Before Hui Yu Hao brought it back, Xu Jiujiu didn't expect Hui Yu Hao to be so quick even though she had high hopes for him. The value of such a Soul tool couldn't be measured on the surface. It would have an important effect on developing the Star Luo Empire's expertise in Soul tools. Duke, you saying that Wang Yiheng was killed by Hui Yu Hao and his comrades? Xu Jiujiu's voice sounded more high-pitched. The White Tiger Duke recounted everything he had seen earlier to her. Dai Hao nodded. Not to even mention that Xu Jiujiu was in disbelief, he would also be unconvinced if he didn't witness it personally. A few Soul Sages and Soul Emperors actually managed to kill a Class 9 Soul Engineer who was also a titled Doluo. At the same time, the Empyrean Blaze, which was ranked 12th among Class 9 Soul tools, was also almost destroyed. Such an outcome wouldn't be surprising if a few titled Doluo were responsible for it. However, how old were Hui Yu Hao and the rest? Their average age might not even be 20 yet. These talents from Shrek Academy demonstrated their strength by performing another miracle. At the same time, they proved their value to all the powerful individuals from the Star Luo Empire. Xu Jiujiu was breathing hard, and didn't make a sound for some time. She couldn't believe something like that had happened. Tonight was even less peaceful than the previous night. He really did it. His abilities? Xu Jiujiu had always found Hui Yu Hao very impressive. She had, on 2 occasions, witnessed Hui Yu Hao's performances in the Continental Advanced Soul Master Academy Soul Dueling Tournament. In addition, she had even personally fought him before. However, it was only now that she discovered that her past understanding of him really belonged to the past. Right now, Hui Yu Hao was beyond her domain of understanding. He was a Soul Sage that wasn't even 20 years old yet, but he was the one who led a kill mission against a titled Doluo. Duke, do you know how they did it? Xu Jiujiu swallowed her saliva and asked with some difficulty. The same question was in heads of the other senior commanders from the Star Luo Empire. Dai Yueheng and Dai Loli were standing behind Dai Hao right now. They had also received news of what happened immediately. Dai Yueheng was now very perplexed. He was also from Shrek Academy, and was also a top-performing student in Shrek Academy's inner courtyard. However, he was also in disbelief right now. He clearly knew that neither he nor the representative team he had formed with Ma Xiaodao could possibly accomplish something like this. They were at least 5 years older than Hui Yu Hao and the rest, but their overall abilities were far behind. Dai Hao sighed and replied, I only witnessed what happened at the end. However, I believe that Yu Hao and the rest took turns to attack throughout the entire fight. They managed to unleash everyone's fighting strength to the extreme through an effective rhythm. This caused Wang Yiheng's power to be continually drained. He only unleashed his full power at the end. Among all of them, 4 played very crucial roles. They are Xu Sanxia, Jiang Nannan, Hui Yu Hao and Ji Juechen. He recounted everything that he had seen. When they watched from afar earlier, they managed to catch hold of Xu Sanxia unleashing his golden Xuanwu's domain before using his turtle god strike to neutralize the Empyrean blazing bull. After that, it was Jiang Nannan's soft bone lock and invincible golden body, as well as Hui Yu Hao's all-out attack. Hui Yu Hao's palm strike was the most crucial. The rest were only weakening Wang Yiheng, but Hui Yu Hao's strike completely destroyed Wang Yiheng's Empyrean blaze and dealt him a fatal blow. I heard that it was Hui Yu Hao's self-invented soul skill. It even contains the power of his emotions. It should be a self-invented soul skill that's a combination of his soul and spiritual power. When he unleashed that strike, I could sense a weird force field around his body. I was even unwittingly drawn in. Even though it was nighttime, it felt as if the sky had changed color when he unleashed that strike. It's just that everything seemed to have been turned into nothingness just as he unleashed his strike. A beam of red light glowed from Wang Yihang's body. If I'm not wrong, that beam of red light should be for protective purposes. However, it was crushed by Hui Yuhao's attack before Wang Yihang was hit. Wang Yihang's Empyrean blaze lost the majority of its control after he was struck. After that, there seemed to be a spear that shot out from Hui Yuhao's head, which penetrated his skull and dealt him a heavy injury. At that point, Wang Yihang's injuries were already very serious. Then, Ji Juechen appeared and used his sword to stab the wound that Hui Yuhao had created. This fully ended Wang Yihang's life. What I noticed was that they coordinated very well with one another, unleashing wave after wave of attacks. They complemented one another very well. I figure that there must be a control-type soul master among them. After that, it was Hui Yuhao's attack. There wasn't any evident soul power undulations when he unleashed his attack. However, I could clearly sense that his greatest fighting strength was unleashed at that moment. It was the key to killing Wang Yihang. After listening to the White Tiger Duke's analysis, the titled Dolor that had also witnessed everything all nodded in agreement. Just like the White Tiger Duke had mentioned, Hui Yuhao seemed to have fused with heaven and earth in that state. It was also his palm strike that completely defeated Wang Yihang. Even Wang Yihang wouldn't have expected that. They were able to succeed partly due to Wang Yihang's own complacency. Otherwise, why didn't he use his invincible barrier and soul protective barrier? He must have been very confident in his own attack. It was a pity that his confidence was a reason for his demise. Xu Jiujiu was stunned, and muttered to herself, Yuhao, I didn't expect you to reach such a level already. Duke, if you're talking about a control-type soul master, that person must be Hui Yuhao. The first time I met him, when he was only 12 or 13 years old, he was already a control-type soul master. His spiritual detection can band his teammates together, and he can share accurate information about the enemy with his teammates. This is very effective in counteracting the fighting strength of the enemy. Dai Yuehang should be the most aware of this. The White Tiger Duke turned his attention towards his son, and Dai Yuehang immediately nodded and replied, Her Highness is right. When I first competed in the soul dueling tournament with Hui Yuhao, he always appeared as a control-type soul master. His spiritual detection is very strong. It should be even stronger now than it was before. The White Tiger Duke nodded, and there was an odd look on his face. No wonder he's the future master of the Sea God's Pavilion. No wonder he can become the youngest elder of Shrek Academy at such a tender age. Xu Jiujiu asked, White Tiger Duke, what should we do next? A cold look flashed across the White Tiger Duke's eyes and he said, Hang Wang Yihang's corpse on a flagpole outside the base for everyone to see. At the same time, I'll need you to send some people to bring the high-altitude aerial surveillance soul tool back for research purposes, Your Highness. Okay. Xu Jiujiu immediately acknowledged his words. Hui Yuhao wasn't interested in the guesses or arrangements of the Star Luo Empire. When he returned into his tent, he immediately entered a cultivation state. His soul power circulated. Although he was greatly drained earlier, his last attack through the Golden Dragon Spear had helped to replenish him by absorbing some of Wang Yihang's immense soul power. Wang Qiu's Golden Dragon Spear was terrifying in the sense that it could absorb the life energy and soul power of the enemy to replenish the fighting strength of its owner. Although Hui Yuhao didn't fully inherit her abilities, he was much more complementary to the Golden Dragon Spear after Wang Qiu's sacrifice. He was even more drained in terms of his spiritual power, especially after he was subjected to the side effects of the Haodong Palm. Right now, his mind was filled with the figure of Wang Dong'er. The pain brought about by his yearning for her could only be understood by him. He couldn't focus even after sitting on his bed for a long time. For some reason, he missed her even more today. Perhaps it was because his palm strike had unleashed his greatest fighting strength. Actually, Hui Yuhao knew that the recoil from Wang Yihang's body after he attacked had hurt him. If this were the past, he might have lost his arm. His attack had well and truly drained all his strength. However, he possessed a part of the Golden Dragon's power since he had fused with Wang Qiu. His strength and physical tenacity were much greater than before. This was why he felt extreme guilt towards Wang Qiu at the same time as he missed Wang Dong'er. These two emotions kept on corroding his mind and spiritual sea. Under such a circumstance, even his four spirits were of no use to him. He could only handle this by himself. Hui Yuhao plopped onto his bed and shut his eyes tightly. He looked very pale, and seemed like he couldn't hold on anymore. He really looked like he couldn't hold on anymore. His yearning for Wang Donga was too immense. It overwhelmed him completely. Donga, are you really alive? He actually always had a thought in his mind, what should he do if the sect and vice-sect leader of the Clear Sky sect were only telling him lies? This was what he feared. Even though he tried his best to steer away from such thinking, he would be overwhelmed with fear every time he had such a thought. Being unable to see Wang Donga forever? What could possibly be more terrifying than that? Donga, 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 Hui Yuhao was groaning softly. Donga, if you've really left this world, then bring me with you. Don't leave me alone in this world to suffer. Donga, I really miss you. Tears flowed down the corners of his eyes. The senior commanders of the Star Luo Empire's Northwestern Field Army couldn't imagine that the young hero in their hearts was actually squirming in his bed right now while crying tears of pain. Hui Yuhao wasn't even clear-headed right now. The curtains to his tent were pulled open, and a tall and slender figure walked into his tent. As she heard Hui Yuhao's groans, her body turned slightly stiff. After that, however, she continued to walk towards Hui Yuhao. Her movements were very slow, as if she found it difficult to walk. However, she suddenly picked up her pace as she came closer to Hui Yuhao's bed. She quickly came to his side and sat down by his bedside. His tears had already wet his blanket. Hui Yuhao's senses were normally very acute, but right now, he actually didn't know that there was someone else in the tent. He continued to squirm and groan in pain. His face was very pale, and buckets of tears and sweat had already fused together as they flowed down his cheeks. Delicate fingers gently caressed his forehead. The movement of the fingers seemed a little stiff and rigid. Hui Yuhao's sweat moistened the white and tender fingers. The fingers seemed to be trembling slightly, and there was a tinge of warmth from them. The lady in the tent was shuddering a little, and was also in a slight state of shock. Donga, don't leave me. Suddenly, Hui Yuhao reached out and grabbed her hand. She was astonished, and wanted to retract her hand. However, his grip was very tight. She didn't struggle, but she could sense that his hands were icy cold. It was icy cold to a terrifying point. It was as if he had lost all the warmth in his body. Don't tell me that he's always in such great pain after he uses his Haodong palm. It was weird, but Hui Yuhao calmed down after grabbing her hand. He stopped shivering as much, but he was still mumbling to himself. However, his pain had evidently been reduced significantly. He's really pitiful. I never thought one could turn out like this from loving someone too much. However, why did he turn his love into a skill? Why doesn't he go and find his lover? Not far outside the tent, there was a person squatting in a dark corner. This person watched as she walked into the tent. A slight smile spread across his face. He slowly stood up. It seemed like he didn't need to stand guard anymore. She didn't come out, even after a long time. This person walked out from the corner. Wasn't he the eternal defense, Shusansha? Hui Yuhao was suffering from the backlash of his Haodong palm, and his body was very weak. Shusansha understood this the best. This was why he followed Hui Yuhao back and stood guard outside his tent as a means of protecting him. However, that lady had been in the tent for a long time without leaving yet. It seemed like he didn't need to carry on with his protection for the rest of the night. He silently left without making a sound. Inside the tent, Hui Yuhao had calmed down. His breathing had become more rhythmic, and he was no longer shivering. At times, he would mumble to himself, but he was evidently in less pain. He used both his hands to grab tightly onto her tender fingers. It was as if he were grabbing hold of some life-saving grass. He wouldn't let go of her hands. Slowly, a satisfied grin surfaced on his face. He had fallen asleep. Following this, moonlight shone in from outside the window. From where she was seated, she caught a view of his profile. She was only here because she was worried about him, and curious about his condition. However, she discovered that she was unable to leave right now. She could most certainly pull her hand back, but she was afraid of harming him in that way, so she didn't do so. He didn't do anything else either. He only tightly grabbed hold of her hand and squirmed in place. He was falling deeper and deeper into his sleep. This is the generational talent that everyone is in awe of? A bitter look appeared across her face. So he's actually this fragile behind the surface. It seems like he has given too much to attain whatever powers he has. But why is he able to calm down after grabbing hold of my hand? Is it because he feels comforted? She retrieved a handkerchief with her other hand and dabbed at the perspiration on his head. Even she didn't know why she did something as intimate as his. He appeared evidently less tense after she wiped off his sweat. It was as if she possessed some kind of magical power that helped him to calm down. His hands started to regain some warmth, and he stopped holding on so tightly. His body also moved with greater ease. She continued to wipe away his sweat. Slowly, she placed her handkerchief to one side, and started to gently caress his hair. He doesn't look too bad. The lines on his face are smooth, and his eyelashes are long. There's some rosiness to his cheeks right now, and the life energy that he's exuding seems to be stronger than anyone else. Unwittingly, she became a little dazed. Just as she was in a daze, he slowly weakened his grip on her hands. "Oh, I can finally leave." She gently retracted her hand, which was already covered with sweat. However, she subconsciously clenched her fist, as if she wanted to preserve the warmth that she felt in her hand. After she retracted the hand that she had placed on his head, she silently stood up. He was still sleeping very calmly, and didn't move at all. She silently walked towards the exit of his tent. However, for some reason, she couldn't help but turn back every few steps. His breathing was still as rhythmic as ever. There wasn't any change. Finally, she got to the exit. She turned back and took one last deep look at him. Someone who's so persistent in love like him should be a good guy. Good night, good guy. Morning. The warm sunlight bore down on Hui Yuhao's face through the window. The heat jolted him from his sleep. As he opened his eyes and felt the blinding sunlight, he subconsciously used his hand to cover his eyes. Oh, it's already so late. Why am I not up yet? Normally, he would already be cultivating in bed at this time. As he sat up, everything that had happened the previous night quickly surfaced in his mind. Hui Yuhao subconsciously took a look at his starlight sapphire ring. In his ring were more than 10 high-altitude aerial surveillance soul tools. Yes, we didn't just manage to successfully steal the high-altitude aerial surveillance soul tools last night. We should have killed the Mad Bull Dolor too. I used my Haodong palm. After I returned, I was in excruciating pain. But why am I not feeling anything right now? In the past, he couldn't recover in one night after unleashing his Haodong palm. He needed a period of time to fully recover. Furthermore, he would always be very groggy the next day. However, he was filled with energy right now, and his body was completely at ease. There weren't any side effects. It was as if he had had a perfect night's sleep, and had even overslept. Weird. After scratching his head, Hui Yuhao stood up and walked out of his tent. The sun was shining brightly today, and the air was very refreshing. As he took in a deep breath, the refreshing air nourished his body, and he was feeling extremely energetic. Hui Yuhao was a little amused as he asked himself, why do I feel so relaxed? And why am I in such a good mood? However, he didn't have an answer. No matter what kind of delicacies he consumed, they weren't able to improve his mood to such a stage. However, he was feeling extremely good today. What exactly happened last night? He furrowed his brow and pondered. He could subtly remember that he was in excruciating pain then. However, Wang Dong'er seemed to have arrived after that and comforted him, alleviating his yearning for her and the pain that he experienced. After that, his pain disappeared, and he fell into a comfortable sleep. Dong'er, did you really come? Hui Yuhao opened his eyes wide. Don't tell me Dong'er has always been hiding by my side and she comes when I'm in pain. To comfort me? It's Dong'er. It must have been her. I must have sensed her aura. He suddenly turned around and charged back into his tent. He leaped onto his bed and took in a deep breath, seeking Wang Dong'er's scent. However, what scent would be left over after one night? There was only his own smell on his bed. Am I just hallucinating? A strong sense of disappointment left Hui Yuhao clenching his fists. However, it was at this moment that his attention was drawn to a corner. He subconsciously reached out his hand and grabbed a squarish handkerchief. This handkerchief was made of silk and felt very soft. It felt like the complexion of a young girl, and there were sweat stains on it. It doesn't belong to me. It clearly belongs to a lady. Hui Yuhao looked at the handkerchief a few times. There weren't any markings on it. There was only a gentle fragrance that came from it. Wang Dong'er. This really seemed like Wang Dong'er's scent. Don't tell me that my feeling was right. That Dong'er really came last night to take care of and comfort me. And she helped me out of my pain? Part 1 end here.